From the cradle to the grave, you are measured against the yardstick of average, judged according to how closely you approximate it or how far you are able to exceed it. A modern conception of the average person is not a mathematical truth, but a human invention, created a century and a half ago by two European scientists, Quetelet and Gorton, to solve the social problems of their era. It's what Todd Rose speaks about in his bestseller, End of Average. Juliana Jackson has dug deep into the minds of data analytics leaders, people that work every day with measurements and metrics, to uncover what mental models they have built to help them understand the world. Join us while we focus on the stories of data analytics leaders and how they use mental models to challenge others to think differently by deviating from conventional approaches.
How are you doing, Charles?
I'm doing very great. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk to you. The last time we had some sort of event together, your the QA section completely blew up. Like I've never seen anything like that before. So for whoever is listening to this, they need to invite you to a webinar or to a podcast or whatever has the QA because you will blow that up. But happy to have you. So tell me, how did you get into this analytics and measurement world? Because mostly everybody has a total different story.
Yeah, so I started, I would say, my career probably a little over 10 years ago. I was kind of finishing up my college degree. I changed majors a bunch of time. I tried math, didn't like when it became theory. I tried being a teacher. I didn't like being what I felt like treated as a child. And eventually I settled on marketing as what someone said they thought I would be good at. So I tried that. But it really wasn't until I got my internships that I had a chance to get real experience. Because at that time, my college courses really only focused on traditional marketing. I had one semester with one course, which was internet marketing. And part of it was learning what is a blog and what is YouTube. And that was the extent of my online experience. So for me, it really all came from my internships. I had two great internships, one with my university at the marketing department, another with a small startup that focused on plastics. And anyways, I got to try all these different parts of marketing. And I quickly realized, okay, ads, kind of interesting, SEO a little bit, but not my favorite. But this analytics stuff, I feel like I really like it. I like being at the kind of core of everyone wanting some information. And as any college student at the time, I felt through my experience that I was kind of an expert at Google Analytics. And I was like, oh, I wonder how much I could do with this and how much I really know. So I went to a conference. I wrote a letter to actually get a discount so I could afford to go through this because my internships wouldn't pay for it. But I went to California. And at this conference, Google was presenting the latest and greatest on Google Analytics. They were promoting real-time analytics and multi-channel funnels and all these new features that didn't exist. And that was cool. But the most fascinating part was I went to a Q&A session with Cardinal Path. They kind of came together at this time as this new company. And I think it was David Booth. In about 5 minutes, he pretty much let me know that I knew nothing about analytics. In fact, everything that I've been doing for the past 2 years was incorrect. I had broken every best practice on setup. I had put UTM tags all over my site. I had just broken like all this analytics that I had been sharing out with the university. But I had this realization right away that every day I would have something new to learn. And that's where I fell in love. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do for a career, was just that feeling of every day having something new to do. And that's true even more so today. Nothing is getting easier. Nothing's getting less complicated. And it's still just as exciting for me as it was at that first moment where I realized I didn't know anything about what I had thought I'd known.
I definitely resonate with that because I feel like that with analytics every day. It's like, oh my God, like the moment you think you know something when it comes to data, you realize very quickly that you might be very wrong, and this is you have to rethink the whole situation. And I definitely agree with the fact that things are becoming harder and more challenging every day, especially in marketing. And tell me also about that teacher part. Like, I didn't know you wanted to be a teacher. How did that happen?
So how did that happen? Well, my wife and I, we went to school at the same time and we were each trying to figure out what we wanted to do as a career. And I don't remember how, like, I've always loved educating and teaching. And like at that time, one of my first jobs was I was a snowboard instructor in Colorado at Arapahoe Basin. That's actually why I went to school in Wyoming, because it was substantially cheaper tuition. And with a 3-hour drive, I could ski in Colorado. So I just couldn't afford to be in Colorado. But, anyways, I drove 3 hours to work every weekend. And many of my favorite experiences were teaching kids and getting them excited about the mountain and snowboarding and just seeing that click with like a new hobby that they're going to pursue lifelong. So that's kind of what motivated me with teaching. And in fact, that's much of what I enjoy most in today with what I do. I love teaching people about Google Analytics. I love teaching people and educating on privacy and all these other kind of topics we're doing. So at one point, I thought I wanted to do that, I think, for children, but I realized that wasn't just going to be a path for me.
I definitely can say that your teaching skills are really good. You have probably something around 4,000 students taking your Google Analytics for course on CXL right now. And when we updated the course recently, everyone was, losing their shit, and it was a very timely update for that course given everything that's going on right now. So let me get this straight. Like one of your biggest hobbies is hockey, but you're from California. How does that work? Like where did the passion for skiing came from, and where did the snow came from in California?
Yeah. So hockey, I mean, I started my winter sports, I think, obsession in Ohio. We have a ski resort that's probably as tall as a 2 or 3 story building. So not very tall or high at all. That's where my wife and I learned how to snowboard. And I would say along the way, I got into like the NHL, the National Hockey League, when I moved to California because I lived in San Jose. And my wife actually has a figure skating background, and she was really, I think, my inspiration because she had always wanted to play hockey as a kid, and her parents wouldn't let her because of the connotations with hockey. So eventually we found an adult learn to play program. So this is something that I learned is actually common in pretty much all cities in US and Canada. Is all the ice rinks have adult programs where they'll teach you how to ice skate, and they'll teach you the fundamentals of hockey, and they'll even put you on a team after where you can play. And then the other thing, which I think is key, is what you see on TV is not what adult hockey's like. There's no of that hitting and contact and checking. It's mostly a non-contact sport where you're just passing the puck and shooting and playing with each other, but not, we all have to go to work at the end of the day. So we're not trying to put people into the boards. But anyways, I don't know, it ignited this huge inspiration. Like it's one of the hardest sports, I think, because it's already hard enough to have hand-eye coordination, but trying to do that while you're skating on 2 razor blades adds a whole nother dimension to it. So anyways, for any of you out, definitely try it out. They'll teach you how to skate, and it's just so much fun. So you get 2 things. You have a stick and all that padding, like it doesn't hurt. You could fall over all day long, and since you're wearing all of that armor, like you're like impervious. So it makes it
That's
actually a
interesting.
lot easier to learn because hitting the ice hurts, right? Especially when you don't have elbow pads and all that. So there's a lot of safety that's involved in it.
So I'm curious from those adult courses that you took, and learned how to play hockey. What things have you learned from that teamwork that you're supposed to have when you're playing sports in general? Like, what are some things that you learn that you're applying to your day-to-day life and to your job?
Yeah, so I feel like there's like 2 classic parts. One is like you can get as good as you want, and it's a matter of time and management and dedication or whatever you want to kind of frame around that. So what I mean by that is like you can get started with hockey, and then if you don't put any effort behind it, you can just kind of stay at the same level. But as you like network, you're going to find there's a wide breadth of experience. Some people have played their whole life. So for me, I was fortunate enough to have some opportunities where I actually took some private lessons. I actually focused on just skating for a while. So I took nothing but skating lessons, nothing with hockey, because you can only really play hockey as good as you can skate. That's like the common denominator. So with that, it allowed me to kind of up level, and I was able to actually play at a higher level quicker than a lot of the peers I started with. I'm very much still a beginner adult hockey player, but it makes it more fun because then you can pass better, other people can skate a little bit faster. It just kind of ups the pace of the game. And secondarily, hockey is very much a team game. So there's 5 skaters and a goalie. And you're going to find like the best teams are always going to have a dynamic where they're passing, they know where each other is going to be. You can learn to kind of predict. And also, you start skating more by looking up instead of looking at your feet and looking at the puck. And it just changes kind of the whole dynamic. So, with that, it's kind of identifying like, okay, well, on your team, who's the playmaker, right? Who's the passer? Who's your person who can always go in and score? And then figuring out kind of what situations you all work together. So it's very much a team dynamic. I love the social aspect of hockey. I think that's what I grew up playing soccer my whole life. And what I found on the weekends when I'd go play soccer, we'd all just show up and then we'd all just leave. And there was like 5 minutes where you warm up together and network, but it takes so long with hockey to put on your gear and you all do it in a locker room that there's like 30 minutes plus of everyone in the locker room talking and getting ready. And then after the game, there's 30 minutes of taking all this gear off. So the social aspect and kind of the friendship is what I've really connected the most with hockey.
Never thought about it like that. Yeah, I used to play football too. We call it football in Europe, but we mean soccer. I'm actually very impressed with an American that likes soccer. You don't really hear that a lot. Like mostly everyone likes American football. Do you have a favorite soccer team?
I do. It's the Seattle Sounders. And last night they won their playoff match. So they're in the CONCACAF final versus Pumas, a Mexican team. And if we win, we actually go, I think, to the FIFA Club World Cup and we might play some of the best European teams. So I'm super stoked about the Sounders and hopefully we'll end up getting that spot.
I need to research them. I'm a Liverpool fan. Down to every point of my being a Liverpool fan. But I need to look. I didn't even know there were American soccer teams. Like I'm so disconnected from American soccer.
So I think
So
now in the America, Major League Soccer is eclipsed and is the third largest now. So it's NFL. I think by attendance is what I'm gauging on. I think it's NFL and then baseball and then MLS is now three. So we have a very successful. I think it's expanded substantially. We have teams in almost every market. But yeah, it's really taken off and it's only going up.
I love it. Like I never watched an American soccer game. I learned something new today. I'm really excited to check this out. Leaving the sports behind, I want to before we go more in deep with other topics. I want to address the elephant in the room. And as we all know, everyone is running towards implementing Google Analytics 4. And it's a twist. So I was talking about this with Simo when I recorded with him. And he was saying that people are taking Google Analytics 4 and basically they're trying to transform it in Universal Analytics. And I just want to know because this is like something that you're very passionate about. What are your thoughts on that? Have you seen this happening?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, I've pretty much only used Google Analytics my career. So I feel like if I look at Universal Analytics, the version that we've used it's a tool I love so much. And I've loved it and I feel like other people love it because when you look at it, it's generally been considered to be substantially easier to use than other tools. So you don't necessarily need a lot of training before you put someone into the product or add them. They can somewhat find their way around. And then, secondly, within a paid media perspective, it was very tightly integrated with ads. So you could easily kind of get at the ROAS. And then, lastly, it was still very powerful. So as you got more sophisticated or wanted to do more advanced things, there's features like advanced segments or measurement protocol or data import, or even on the enterprise version, all these features that let you take things to a whole other level. And for me, that's really what is it centers around it was seen as being very easy to use and very powerful. And when we look at Google Analytics 4, I think, unfortunately, or just the way it is, it's just really early. So Google had 15 years to get Universal to where it is. And GA4, it's only been around for a few years now. And it was taken out of beta only a few years ago. And even with it being out of beta, there's lots of things in it that are still beta or even alpha or new features that seem to be coming every week. So the missing pieces right now, I feel like with GA4 is most people are finding right now it's not as easy to use, or that ease of use feeling they had from Universal doesn't yet exist in GA4. And then since Google's still really looking or still actively developing it and releasing all these new features, there's a lot of stuff kind of in flight for even the advanced stuff, which can be a little bit hard to grasp. But at the same time, like if you're looking at features and benefits, GA4 instantly offers some really important benefits. So I'll give you an example. Previously in the free version, or I'm sorry, in Universal Analytics, this version we've always used, you could make a strong argument that you couldn't really do advanced analytics at all in the free version because you never had access to the raw data. You could only use the API, and it was very limited with what you could do with it. And that meant that basically only people who could pay for the enterprise version and could get access to that BigQuery integration could do advanced analytics. But what Google's done with GA4 is they've actually taken almost all of the features that were in the enterprise version, and they're actually in the free version of GA4. All of the media connectors like DV360 and Search Ads 360, and then that BigQuery connector, it's actually in there at no cost. So what that does now is it kind of builds a new level playing field where hopefully GA4, the promise of it's going to be, you have a tool that can work with you at every level of that journey. So right now it feels like it can do all the advanced stuff and it can open up that journey. And then my hope is right now, I feel like where it's roughest is kind of at that beginner intermediate user. But hopefully Google, between now and July of next year, kind of that date you pointed out, is going to make it substantially easier to use, make it much more exciting. So I feel like we still have time. So the nice part is what I'm at least advising customers to do right now is just implement GA4, just get the data flowing. It doesn't mean you have to use it yet today. You can still use the old version as your primary tool until July of next year. And I'm doing that a lot for my day-to-day. And then in GA4, I'm implementing it, I'm getting the data going, and I'm starting to do some things in it. And then my hope and expectation is between now and July of next year, as Google improves the product, I'll intrinsically start spending more and more time in it, but I'm not doing like a hard cutover yet. Why is it being deprecated? I think there's a few reasons, like one, I always share that story. Like you can still use the original tracking code from 15 years ago, that urchin.js version of the tracking code, and it still works today. And I think you'd be very hard pressed to find many products within your business that work with the version of whatever code from 15 years ago. So I illustrate that because that's been both a blessing because it's kind of kept the core of GA the same, but it's also been problematic. So a lot of people might not realize, like if you start really pushing Google Analytics, the universal version, certain parts of it don't really function the way it should. And if you think about a lot of it, some of it doesn't even make sense to begin with. And I'll give you some examples. Real-time analytics right now is actually really broken in universal. I think Google, maybe even today, just added a disclaimer of saying that there's some challenges with GA4. A lot of people in the community have done. It's just not reporting correctly. So that's like breaking. Other examples, like let's think of goals. Like you set up a conversion in Google Analytics. They don't make any sense because when you set up a goal, it's sessionized, meaning it only counts once per session. So if you wanted to make a goal for your business of video views, you don't actually have a count of video views. It's going to be this weird sessionized metric for it. And you'd have to do all of this abstract things to get your true count. Or even better yet, if you implemented Google Analytics 10 years ago, you still only have the same 20 goals or conversions that you had today because you could never reuse them. You could never delete them. And GA4 is kind of built to actually archive, meaning we can do seasonal and campaign-based goals. So at the end of the day, I think you could make an argument that, Google could maybe go to universal and make all these changes. But it's just important to note that all those changes are coming on 15 years of architecture. So the way we think about all of this from a feature perspective, or even the data model perspective, which I know Simo and lots of others have talked about, the GA4 data model is a lot simpler and it makes a lot more sense than how we thought about data in Universal. So even the implementation of GA4 is a lot easier than it was with Universal because it intrinsically maps to the Google Tag Manager data
Yeah.
object. It maps to the data object of an Adobe or all these other platforms. So that's really what it comes to me is it feels like it's just time from a legacy perspective. And then what I feel like my thing is like why now versus later. And unfortunately, at some point, you just have to make the switch over. Does it make sense to have two products that do the same things going for an X amount or an indefinite amount of time? So my hope is that what Google's signaling by putting these dates out here is that by July of next year, GA4 is going to be prime time in almost every way. And I think the hard part for us as marketers is in certain areas, we're waiting for Google to release new features like product level custom dimensions or, maybe some more flexible reports in the UI. So hopefully all that stuff comes. And then, in 6 months, 12 months from now, we're talking about why GA4 is exciting and not kind of having this fear-based approach to it. But on that side, Google has a lot of work they have to do.
This discussion that it benefits e-commerce more than it benefits the SaaS.
So I haven't heard that particular question because GA4 has e-commerce reports. I've actually heard it more compared to a product analytics tool, which would
Hmm.
basically be SaaS, more so than ecom, because the core data model is adapting kind of that product based approach where we have events and we have parameters. So we're not doing this weird thing with what's a category, what's an action, what's a label. We're just calling things what they are. So GA4 is adopting a more kind of product centric approach for its default data model. And then the thing right now is from the UI perspective, there's not necessarily like a pre-canned set of reports, I would say, for B2B or for SaaS or for some of these other verticals, but the promise of it is there. So Google has released for the first time the ability where you can change the left-hand nav in Google Analytics. So you can actually customize what reports you see when you log in. Unfortunately, right now it's really limited because when you change that, it changes it for all users. So what
Hmm.
I'm hoping happens is that Google allows us the ability to basically have
Role
a
based.
group of users and then a group of reports, and then you can apply those. So think about what happens if your product team logs in and they see product reports, and then your SEM team logs in and they see paid media, and then your social team sees all the social and content reports. So that's the promise of GA4. It's supposed to have that flexibility. We just don't yet kind of have the full feature set to execute that. So, anyways, I would say from a data perspective of capturing the data in a SaaS based approach, all that stuff's there. Some of the features are there too, but you just have to curate and manage your reports more manually right now. And then over time, that common theme of it being easier is hopefully what Google's going to actually make happen.
Cool. So Sanjeev, if you're listening to this, I hope you're satisfied because we ended up contradicting each other for 30 minutes on this topic. Okay, great. There's an expression that I really, really like a lot, and I think it's very relatable to the reality that we're living in. And it goes like this: it's being data rich and insights poor. So we can correlate this expression from our personal lives and how we're living our personal lives, but also what's happening at our jobs. So I'm wondering, what are some mental models that you have acquired through your specialization that just help you parse all this data around you, and you are that helps you think better, because the purpose of a mental model is to help someone think better. It's some sort of schema that you have in your head that helps you make better decisions, or see the things around you better. So because you're someone that works with measurements and metrics all the time, I'm really curious if your specialization has taught you how to think or how to interact with the world.
Yeah. So The way I kind of think of that question is I also think of another question that I sometimes get asked, which is like, who or what qualities kind of make a great analyst, in my opinion? And what's interesting about that is obviously this is similar to your question about hockey. It's like a team-based thing, and you're going to have people kind of specialize in different things. But if we're framing the question as like who is going to help, get the insights from the data most, like from that strategic kind of high level sense, I've always found for me the number one trait is like puzzling. Like people who like to have different pieces of a puzzle and then are passionate about putting it together. Like actually in the real world, I love doing puzzles. I love doing Legos. Like that just kind of intrinsic building and puzzle making skill is what does it. And for me, the driving kind of trait behind that is the why question. So when you're approaching like GA4 or analytics, it's always just constantly asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Because in a business sense, you're inundated with people asking for data. And a lot of people who are asking for data don't frankly need it, or what they're asking for isn't really going to change anything, is kind of what I'm getting at. Like the classic thing, oh, how many people click this random button on the site? Well, why do you want to know that? Why do you care? Are you actually more interested in how many people are converting or how this is leading to the next step of a conversion funnel? Or do you literally just want to know how many people click this button? So if I flip this question a little bit, I can answer it in a different way. For any of you who are getting started with GA4, what I would highly recommend is just focus on the basics and keep it as basic as makes sense. So literally, when you're implementing GA4 for the first time, my framework is just start with the conversions. Just start with your main tracking code. You track your page views, track the key conversions, and then make sure that the data behind that is great or perfect or whatever level of quality you want to put behind it. And then what you should do next is then implement the things that lead to the conversions. So your micro conversions, basically your funnels, whatever funnels lead to an outcome, that's what you track next. And you might actually be able to consider your implementation complete after just those two things, because a lot of where things can go off the rails is where you start focusing way more down funnel on those random clicks, those random buttons, trying to track random content. That's not necessarily key to getting someone through your core funnels. And that's where you can just run into that constant, it's never done, it's never complete. And you've never had a chance to take a step back and be like, okay, well, I've now spent, 20 hours or 50 hours of trying to get all this stuff to work, but have I been able to do anything with that data? Have I been able to take action? Has it actually changed how I'm doing any of my marketing? So it's not getting stuck in constant implementation and really taking a step back. And as you're thinking through the implementation, also thinking through, well, why am I doing this? What am I trying to do? What core questions do I have? How can I apply this to my email program? How can I apply this to my SEM program? And just really trying to strive to having something to show of how you're driving action. And just doing that in and of itself, I think can really change the game. And that's what all of us struggle with as analysts, trying to drive change and trying to drive action. So just make that something you focus on.
So I have a question. You said in the beginning that there's, different people in the analytics team and everyone has their strengths or they have their limitations. And I read this interesting article years ago from Avinash, the Google evangelist, and he was saying that a lot of it was like the purple squirrel or something like that. The person that has all the traits is a purple squirrel. But I want to ask you something that I'm thinking about in the last period. Do you feel that the role of the analyst is trying to be very outsourced in the marketing team? Like when you're hiring a marketer right now, you're expected the person to know how to work with SEO, how to work with analytics, how to work with CDPs, how to work with everything. But they're not an analyst per se. They might be just a content marketer. They might just be a product marketer, but the expectations are that person to learn analytics or to learn how to work with data. And at the same time, you have a data team, but you don't trust the evidence from the data team. You trust the marketers, evidence, which is some in maybe in some cases it might be better or accurate, but in most cases, the data that would come from someone that is trained into this discipline is, more accurate than someone that has no idea about the why and doesn't know how to ask the right questions. Because I think at the end of the day, asking the right questions is essential to be able to understand data. So, what do you think about that?
There's always those classic, I forget who makes those graphs of all the marketing products that you could use in an organization. There's an insane amount of CDP,
Chief
marketing
Martech,
automation, and email. Yeah, chief martech, exactly.
yeah.
It's just insane. So what I find is it's most important, to obviously try and acquire talent around the stack or the core parts of the stack you used. And then from a capabilities perspective, what I find is you want someone that is usually deep in one area. So either it's going to be deeper in one area or more broad. And that just depends where they're coming in, right? If you're putting someone as like a senior strategist or running a marketing program, then they need more of those broad. Whereas if you're hiring someone, for running an email campaign or launching your optimization program, then it's going to be more deep. But the key skill in each of those hires should be, you should find two, I think, key themes. One, that they're passionate about trying to deliver excellence to the customer. And I mean your customers. And then secondarily, that they're also passionate and want to learn. And that's kind of that puzzling skill. And it's going to be learning from others on your team. So like for me, I can't really do anything competently at SQL or JavaScript. So that means I can't do custom implementations of Google Analytics. I can copy code from the internet and do that, but I'm not coding. Also, from an advanced analytics standpoint, I can talk about doing CRM joins. I can talk about doing predictions. I can talk about all this advanced stuff, but I can't code any of it. I can't do it. However, on my team, I know exactly who to go to talk to when I need to do that. And then I know how to intrinsically talk about the customer and why what I'm doing is going to benefit the customer and get them excited and want to learn and kind of partner with each other to drive that forward. So I think that's really important in kind of today's marketing world, is just kind of building that team oriented approach. And that's the culture, right? That's the culture part of it. And you can always learn more. You can find courses, you can find other people. Conversion Excel has amazing amount of resources on a lot of that. And it's just a matter of having the right people, because the knowledge can always follow.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think there's like the silos that they start to become, like less. They have to start happening less than they are, because there's such a big gap between analytics and marketing and product. And it's because every team has their own metrics and everything has their own KPIs. When I was consulting e-commerce brands, I was used to working with CDPs. So I was looking at the data that the CDP was telling me, and I was making decisions based on what I was seeing there. But then I will never forget, I had an senior analyst in the team of the brand, and he just came with some insights from Data Lake and said, "You're wrong. The retention rate was 50%," and I was like, "Fuck it, we're good. It's 50%. Let's do this." And then he showed me that month over month, the retention rate was actually 17%. And I was like, how in the world? So like I think that collaboration helped me not mess up that customer and lose credibility, but also help me become better and start looking at things deeper. That's why way I'm looking at SQL right now, because it makes me ask better questions to myself and not just believe everything. Like I think critical thinking is also a big part of just doing excellent work for your customer. So I met you through a CXO course that you did. You guys should definitely check it out. It's really good, and you'll find out how to implement Google Analytics 4 through Google Tag Manager. So I know you are insanely dedicated to the measurement community. I see you there all the time and I like it. And also you're very into education and teaching people. I read your blog and I see your Twitter. I just want to know like what motivates you to give back. I know in the beginning you said that you wanted to teach kids and become a teacher. So I'm assuming you transferred that energy and channeled it into community and being of service to others right now.
Yeah, I feel like it all comes from that kind of intrinsic value of like knowledge goes both ways, right? What you get is what you should give, and then it kind of comes back, and that's how you grow. So when I think of my career, when I go back to that story I said at the beginning, I learned very quickly that, the year plus that I had spent in Google Analytics, I didn't know anything. I was doing things wrong and incorrectly. So I got another job at Enor, which has now eventually became Cardinal Path. And at that job, I just knew I wanted to soak up as much information as possible. So what that looked like is pretty much every day Googling answers all day long, asking questions on forums, and then bothering my coworkers to no end to try and learn exactly the ins and outs of everything. And I've always just had a passion of then as I learn something, wanting to help and explain that to others. And I feel like I try and always try to be a little bit of a different presenter and different kind of educator from others that I've kind of seen. I struggled initially, like when I would go to conferences or even some trainings, it would always be like slideware. And I could never relate to slideware. I just always wanted to see the actual product and see, like, if you were talking about doing insights, well, how did you get to those insights? What made that happen? What did it look like behind the scenes? So when I approach all of that, you'll find this in my CXL course and a lot of the other things I do. I don't try and use slides at all. I try and do all in product demos. I try and guide you through exactly how this works. When I do my workshops, I have everyone actually create a website. And as you're saying, on that website, you create your own GTM, your own GA4. And it's trying to just show you, like, here's how it actually works. And for me, that's how I learned everything is I had to do it myself. I had to see it. I had to experience it. And even today, like, I'm still learning so much from others. So on Measure Slack, I'm learning just as much as I give, and I love it. And that's why I do it.
I know how you're doing it with demos. When we did that webinar, I didn't know what to expect because I just met you, right? I knew you through your course. And then I just saw you open, you shared your screen and you just started going straight in GM or G4. And I was like, shit, this is different. I've never seen this before because I was expecting, how it is usually. You come with the slides, you show, like, it's nothing wrong with that, of course. Like, everyone has their own, like, some people can really deliver awesome presentations, but I wasn't ready. And I remember I was messaging the product team and Pip and everyone on Slack. I was like, oh my God.
And for anyone out there that's like in the presenter world or starting to get into like this education or just talking to other people, I actually learned a lot from Simo on this as well. So one of my biggest takeaways, Simo's wrote some great content on what's worked for him for like presenting and his conferences. And I found it fascinating to learn that he didn't really do any prep. Like, he didn't do dry runs. And when I was early kind of in my career, I remember for even some of my trainings or the slides I would create or even my demos, I would rehearse like over and over and over again. And I found like actually trying Simo's approach where, of course I might do one dry run or just kind of do things for a time check, but I try and just
Mhm.
make it authentic, like a conversation. And what happens, happens. And even in some of my demos and stuff, sometimes the product breaks and you can kind of just take it for what it is. And it just makes it this authenticity, right? And it's not like someone's reading off a teleprompter. So that was like one, I would say, huge learning that's really helped me in the past few years is trying to get out of making things so rigid and just make it kind of more fluid. So anyways, that's helped me.
No, but it's true, and yeah, like he seems like he's a natural, and I've seen his past conferences that I never like. He was in Romania at some point, and I could not afford to go to that conference. I should have wrote a letter like you did back in the day. But I want to move to a topic which is mostly like the living organ of my podcast and why I want to talk to analytics people. And for everyone who's listening, this is a podcast that I'm doing just for myself, and it's the category of the podcast is society and culture. It's just that I had this idea in my head that analytics people have very good discipline in terms of understanding the world and understanding data. And I just wanted to talk to you guys because I admire you and I want to become better. So this is one of the most selfish podcasts out there. So for whoever is listening, you are participating. Proudly sponsored by CXL.com. I have to mention that too. I want to talk about individuality. This is my last topic. And for someone like you that works with measurements and metrics every day, I'm sure you're always finding outliers. And of course, in the broadest sense, outliers, don't necessarily help you make, like large changes in the way you're doing work or you're approaching a campaign or whatever. But I'm sure that when it comes to our lives, individuality becomes an outlier, and it's something that you should not ignore. But I see that we are looking always for answers about our individuality while looking at averages or groups or categories of people or different communities and so on. So, what are your thoughts on how we are seeking the truth about ourselves and trying to find what makes us unique or special? Like, how do we find our own outliers?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I struggled with a lot of this and I still struggle with it. It's about figuring out what your passions are, figuring out and being able to communicate what you're not passionate in is just as important. And then along the way, being able to communicate things that you want to try and then recommunicate it when it is and isn't things you want to focus on. So, and I can kind of put that in perspective maybe of marketing. So, you know, like when I started my career, at one point I thought like I really just wanted to do training. Like I wanted to do all the training I could. I wanted to meet with customers and just train, train, train. And I got really wrapped up into wanting to do that. But the whole reason I got into my career in the first place was that sharing I shared with you. I get inspired and I get motivated when things aren't the same every day. When there's new things I'm learning, new things I'm applying. So when I get into this mindset of just training, at some point very quickly it just ends up being the same thing over and over and over again. So, I've definitely struggled at points in my career where I've gone to my managers and stuff and been like, here's what I want to do. And I only want to do this. Or, there are certain things that I might want to dive deep into, like SQL or data science or learning JavaScript. But if we kind of go back to some of the things we talked about, there's no amount of items or there's no shortage of a list of things you could learn or do, but it's just realizing like where you want to focus on. And I feel like in an individual setting, it's really important to give people an opportunity to try new things so they can learn whether they like it or they don't like it and then where their strengths kind of lie. So for me, I feel like I'm really good at those live demos, like as an example, but I'm not really great at like executive level presentations that might require slideware. I'm also really great at having free form conversations with customers, including executives in the room. And others on your team, like especially when you think of like traditional data science or engineering, you might have people who could do the best implementations and make magic happen, but they don't necessarily have those customer facing skills. And sometimes that comes down to they've never been given an opportunity to kind of bridge over. Or sometimes it's a matter of certain people don't like being thrown into having to deliver a presentation. They just don't want to do that. So, on an individual perspective, I feel like within marketing or just in any team, what I've learned is just most important is to give people an opportunity where if they're expressing interest, they have a method to try something new, and then that it's flexible where they have an opportunity to change that. I don't know. It just kind of goes back to that puzzling, just being able to find whatever your own kind of puzzle that you're building for you. And that's what I feel like is best. And I know, there's great presenters, there's great implementation people, there's great email people, and I can think through this network that I've made through CXL and elsewhere, like this is the best person for this or that or this. And it's never one person. It's always a team, and each of us have our own kind of gifts and then things we also struggle with. And it's just kind of leaning into both sides of it are what makes us all special.
I like that. I want to ask you on this topic for people that are trying to, I guess, people that are good practitioners or trying to become good practitioners in analytics, but they also want to be a part of, the scene the scene, which is, you, which is Simo, which is Mercer, which is Krista, like people that want to get there. Obviously you guys are there because you constantly gave to the community, like you guys have dedicated to the community, and you were put in that position because of hard work, like you guys really work like nobody else. But there's people that are looking at you guys, and because, like, as you saw, social media is a shit show, complete shit show. They think it's so easy to become something and to be invited to podcasts or to events, but like I don't think it's like that in the analytics world. I think here that the barrier of entry is not that easy as it is for other disciplines. So, like, what would you advise people that are trying to get into this world and build and present or go to conferences or just, how to put themselves out there because it's very competitive?
Just, I mean, it's like anything else. If you want to get great and you want to be at this level, you have to put in the work at the end of the day. But the opportunities I feel like now are better than ever. So there's like communities like Measure Slack where everyone's just sharing knowledge. They're just helping each other. And there's an opportunity there to learn and then also to contribute. And for me, I learned a lot by trying to contribute. And it's okay to learn from other people as you're kind of working through that. Um, but it's all just kind of starting at that foundation. So joining the communities, joining the forums, showing up at conferences, starting to network, putting yourself in those uncomfortable spots where you sit down at a table with a Krista or a Simo. All of us love sharing, love connecting, love communicating. And then at some point you have to take that next step in your career. Like if your current job, it doesn't give you the opportunities for you to learn and to apply and to get into what you really care about, then you have to figure out how you can get yourself there. And for me, I started all the way back then with internships, finding an agency, and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you so much. And also, thank you for being here today. Check the footnotes to find out where you can connect, follow, or read Charles